baby. You threw my heart away. It's not just a game, babe. I really wanted to stay, yeah. When you told me forever, did you have your fingers crossed? Try me on like a sweater. Must have been a fleeting thought. I'm not surprised. I'm glad it's over. I burned my pictures of you. I'm glad it's over. You never told me the truth. Yeah, you let me down. Yeah, you let me down. But you won't let me down again.
Welcome to Beethewellness Podcast, episode number 17.
Hello, everyone. Welcome.
We were just 2 episodes ago at 15. It's
yes.
funny how counting works.
You really are good with numbers.
Good with the numbers.
Yep.
Over here. So we're, wrapping week 2, starting week 3 of June, and getting ready to kick off summer next, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, we just want to say hello to all the folks out there who are not actually in Unveil Your Wellness with us.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of people who are listeners of the podcast and who hang out with us every week, but are not actually in the program. So we've been getting emails from folks that are like, I'm not, in your group, but I love the podcast and all that good stuff. So we want to say hello to all of you folks out there. And obviously, it's by no means required that you're in Unveil Your Wellness, and we're glad that you're getting some value out of this podcast. And if you ever want to join us in Unveil Your Wellness, we'd be happy to see you there too. But hello.
Yeah, that's cool. Welcome.
It is cool.
Thanks for listening.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had a bunch of good questions from the last go around when we pinged the group saying, hey, what did we want to talk about? And so what we kind of decided to do was make this one sort of like a power round and get through a bunch of smaller ones, because I think, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to attack it yet, but there was a lot of requests for some detailed discussions on stress and stress reduction and how it, kind of affects everything. And that's probably, it's a big one. So I'm not sure how we're going to break that up, but I think we're going to do a lightning round today and get through a bunch of this stuff, and then we'll sort out the rest. Cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm down. Since I'm the only one to answer, I'll answer.
Yeah. Well, basically I'm talking to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 1, and it's a good question. Why strength before Metcon, meaning the conditioning? So the question is referencing the way that we do our daily workouts, where it's some sort of a warm-up, some sort of mobility, then a primary strength session, and then after that some kind of conditioning, although some of it's pretty light on the conditioning front, but that's generally the breakdown.
Yeah, and just for those of you who are not familiar with the term Metcon, and Adam's obviously referring to conditioning, but Metcon is short for metabolic conditioning. Yeah,
which is which is just like a fancy term for energy system development, which is kind of what we were talking about last week, right? The anaerobic and anaerobic energy system. So, you're conditioning your metabolism.
Bam.
Which I don't know what else you would condition. I don't know. It's
your butt.
Right. Okay.
Your lungs. Okay. Go ahead. I'm just giving you a few other
things that could possibly be conditioned besides your metabolism. Okay.
Yes.
So we don't. I guess so. Short answer is we don't always do strength first, but it just happens to be kind of the cycle that we're in right now. We do the strength first because it's our primary goal on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday workouts, which is what we're discussing here. And generally speaking, we want to focus on the heavy movements first early on in the workout when we're still fresh. And the idea being that when you're nice and fresh, you've got plenty of strength to get the kind of adaptation that you're looking for. So you want to do them first. There's a caveat to that, though, and if you end up with a really gnarly, intense metabolic conditioning session after your strength session, it may be that it's strong enough to sort of swing your adaptation to the metcon, if that makes sense.
Right. More so to the metabolic conditioning than the strength.
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of have to play this balance there. So there's this concept called training interference where, one thing that you're doing could interfere with the adaptation of the other. And
this is not to be confused with muscle confusion.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, this is not muscle confusion. This is training confusion, and it's not a good thing. Yeah, so training interference. I mean, like the classic example of this is if you're like a bodybuilder type and you go in and you hit back and buys and then you go run 6 miles. Like the adaptation to your back and buys is probably going to be minimized by the long, slow distance running that you did afterwards. And I mean, that's kind of an extreme case, but when we're talking about putting the way that we're programming these strength sessions, it's why we're keeping the metabolic conditioning relatively short. Because if you the body tends to adapt to the strongest stimulus, but it can also adapt to the most recent stimulus if it's close or equal to intensity, if that makes any sense at all. So you just kind of have to be careful with how long and intense the conditioning work is after the strength session. And then, kind of to a lesser degree, the opposite's true. So like if we were to swap them around, let's say we're focused primarily on some level of conditioning. So we're going to go out and do, tempo intervals and then high resistance intervals and some sprints, and then finish the whole thing off with like 5x5 back squat or something. Like it's the squat is going to have less interference with the conditioning that you did early on than the opposite would. So it's just kind of one of those things. But to kind of tie all of this back together, we switch it up. Generally speaking, we want the hardest stuff to be done first when you're nice and fresh to get the largest adaptation from, and then we'll make the conditioning short enough to be effective, but not so much that it swings your entire adaptation over to the conditioning side until we want to do that, which we're going to be kind of doing a little bit of that, switching it up going into summer.
Right. So when we're strength focused, we want to think about, okay, if you're trying to, add a little weight each week, and we've talked about this in the past for lower body, maybe you're trying to add 10 pounds a week, and for upper body, 5 pounds a week. If you're trying to do that, you want to make sure that you can recruit as much of your energy system as possible in the beginning of your workout. Whereas if you do it after your metabolic conditioning, you might be smoked, and that increase or that focus on increasing your muscle potential each week is going to kind of fall to the wayside.
Yeah, that was probably a way better way to say that.
Well, I don't know. I just like to repeat what you say in different words.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's kind of the sitch. And there is sort of a circumstance, maybe if you're a general physical preparedness trainer, like you're just looking for GPP and you're not super concerned about big strength gains or something like that, then it probably is smart to switch it up and not really get set in much of a pattern. Because if you're looking for that general physical preparedness, and who knows, you may want to train squatting heavy when you're gassed from some kind of a workout, right? So that's kind of the CrossFit idea,
Yeah.
Just bounce that stuff around and make it as miserable as possible. So I mean, there's probably a spot for that, but we're a little more controlled.
Right.
Yeah.
And we, like you said, we will switch it up when our focus changes.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are thinking, well, what if I do want to change it up because that might be something good? We are changing it up. So don't worry, that's factored into the year-long sort of overlook at everything. So you don't necessarily need to trip on it.
Yeah.
And you can kind of go with our flow and that'll still happen.
Yeah. If you don't want to think about it at all, don't.
Yeah.
if it's something you're really interested in, then that's cool. We can come up with different ways of doing it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess now that we've been talking about all of the strength stuff, one of the questions was how to know if you are, or how to ascertain some common faults in the squat. So squatting is probably one of the cornerstones of working out, really. I mean, it's in not only our strength sessions, but in a lot of our metabolic conditioning sessions as well. Yeah. So
and in our mobility sessions and in our,
in our life sessions.
In our life sessions.
So to really Yeah. So to get our squat really dialed in and to know that we are in the correct position, especially since we're training it so much, is a really good call. And by all means, there's some great videos out there, and maybe we can link to a couple of coaching videos from CrossFit and some other things that have some really good cues. But a couple of things to think about just when, and obviously, sometimes it's nice to work out with someone else so you can kind of look at each other and sort of ascertain if some of these things are happening. But one of the things that is a really common fault is the knees come over the toes. So especially a lot of folks don't have that good ankle flexibility. And if you're squatting and your knees are coming out over the toes and your heels are coming off the ground, that's like numero uno fault. And, this happens a lot to people because I think they, if you haven't been trained in the squat position at all, that's usually a pretty easy position for people to get in, even if they have poor ankle flexibility or, tight hip flexors, whatever they have, they can usually get into that position pretty easily. But that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a really big one to look for.
Yeah. So the fix for that is to keep your heels, placed firmly on the floor, and then you initiate the squat movement with your hip. So the hip should move. The hip should start to close before the knee starts to bend. If your hip moves before your knee, then odds of all of that Vanessa was just discussing go way, way down.
Yeah. And, when a lot of times in CrossFit or other gyms, they'll have people squat to a box or have them squat to something so that they're actually reaching their hips back and reaching for something behind them to correct that very common mistake of coming up on the toes or knees out in front of the toes. And that actually having something behind you helps you to kind of think about sinking back into your heels and getting back into the position. And if you don't have something to squat to, or you don't have the balance, or you're not quite sure if you feel like you're going to fall back in that position, a great thing you can do is grab on to a door handle. So both sides of the handle, and use that as a counterbalance. And you can, get your hips back and use that door to balance you through the whole range of motion.
Yeah.
So that's a really great fix.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's what I have my mom do.
Yep. So knees coming out over the toes, and it has to be quite a ways past the toes. I mean, we're, the ankle bends, and there's actually a very strong, kind of pressurization thing that goes on in the knee, which is fine, as long as everything we just described is happening as well, where that movement's being initiated from the hip. And the knee's just sort of there to get you out of the bottom, and the shin goes vertical and then the hips come up. I mean, that sort of thing is totally safe in that overpressurized knee position. But so another one is the knee collapse inward or valgus knee fault. And you see this one a ton in people who have super tight or dominant quads and weak glutes. This is just what happens. Like your knees will collapse in to transition the load from the outside of your butt and your hamstrings to your quads. That's just what happens. So you go to stand up and your knees bloop, buckle into the inside, and look at that, you can make it and everything's just fine. But that's you're escaping the the range of motion, and it's a sketchy position for your knee to be in.
So conversely, if you are able to really correct that imbalance and you're really able to drive those knees out, you can get a lot more power output through that whole range of motion as well. So it's a great way to increase your power output, just thinking one cue, and that's drive knees out.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's best gained from the top, right? So when you're standing at the top, you do that torque creation thing where you sort of, rotate almost like you're digging your feet into the ground and trying to rotate them externally, and that fires up your glutes. And then when you actually sit down to the squat, that same sort of knee out position translates to activated glutes, which is a lot more power.
Right. And when Adam's talking about turning your feet out, one of the things we like to talk about is pretend you have a piece of paper between your feet. And if you were trying to twist and tear that piece of paper apart by just rotating those knees out and kind of twisting the feet out, if you will, that piece of paper would tear. So that's the torque you're looking for, and that's where you create tension.
But we want it to be like an untearable piece of paper.
Yes.
So your feet are still you never actually tear it. So your feet are still pointed straight forward, but you're applying that pressure.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
Yeah, and let's see, another fault we'll see very often is that you are too deep or too shallow. So if what we're looking for is a nice 90-degree angle. Sorry, I'm squatting away from the microphone as I'm talking about it. So there might be some variance in my voice there, but you're looking for that nice 90-degree angle at the knee and the hip, and you really don't need to go too far past that. Once you go too far past that, you have what we call the butt wink, and you start to lose tension when you're too far in the bottom position.
Yes. Well, right. So if your butt winks under. So this is like the part where it gets tricky, because some people's hips are just completely different than others. So like what Vanessa's talking about with dropping into this sort of 90-degree angle, if you hit peak tension there, and you'll feel it, you're like, whoa, that's the bottom of my squat. As long as I maintain my lordotic curve and sort of like the integrity of my hip, right? If I don't maintain it, then my butt winks under, and then you lose that peak tension in your hamstring and glute. But some people, like if you look at Olympic weightlifters, especially Chinese Olympic weightlifters, their butt is 2 inches off the ground. They are down in the very bottom of that with a completely neutral spine and no butt wink. Right. But you don't see that with the Russian weightlifters. They're just different hip structures. It's kind of what it comes down to.
And to clarify, the butt wink, when we're talking about that position, it's when you actually get so far into the bottom position of your squat that you, like Adam said, you lose the lordotic curve in your spine and your butt starts to round under. So it looks kind of like if your butt was in the right position, it sort of winks under, it sort of tucks under, if you will.
Yeah, you get a little boop.
Yep.
It goes from what looks like a really powerful position to what looks like, the grok squat sitting at the bottom, like you're going to eat rice all day.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like your back is sort of in this rounded curve versus this really powerful sort of, I'm going to squat something position,
Right. So finding the correct position for you where you don't lose that lordotic curve and where you can still keep the tension is kind of the sweet spot. And like Adam said, it might be a little bit different for each individual based on their hip structure. But for the most part, most people are pretty, if you know that you're looking for that 90-degree angle at your knee, that's probably something that's pretty good to shoot for.
Yeah. Yeah. Or thighs parallel. I mean, there's a couple different ways to look at it, right?
Right.
Or parallel? Yeah, parallel.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a good one. And that's something too that like over time will get better. If you at some point you'll run into the hip structure problem, and that you're just only going to be able to squat so deep. But a lot of people will be way above parallel or way above that 90-degree angle and hit peak tension because they're limited in their hamstring or glute flexibility or hip flexors. I mean, there's some sort of flexibility problem there, which will improve over time. So that eventually will get lower and lower and lower until you hit your genetic limit for squatting.
Yeah, and you actually see that with when folks start adding a little bit more weight, sometimes it'll actually fix some of those problems because you've got enough load on you now that you can really drive into your heels. You can really kind of sit back into that squat, where sometimes when you're a little bit lighter on weight, it can be even trickier to sit back in your heels because you feel like you're going to fall over if you sit back too far. Yeah,
totally. And it's one of the things that we really like about the goblet squat, that dumbbell or kettlebell front rack squat or goblet squat, because it just puts those lighter loads and puts them out farther in front of you, so you can do exactly what Vanessa was saying. It's just a better counterbalance. It's almost hard to squat wrong with doing the goblet squat, and that's why we like it so much,
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the other things too that's a very common fault here, because it used to be taught all the time, is the head position. So people used to teach that you should arch your neck and look up at the sky when you're squatting. And I don't really even know what the original reasoning behind that was, but it just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. And we find that when you tip your head back like that, you actually break some neural connections. Like they're not broken, but you lose like concentration and focus. So if you're like looking straight ahead with a neutral spine and your chin kind of tucked, you can maintain better muscle control and like tighter contraction. Seen it happen. So
yes,
chin
absolutely.
down, neutral spine, eyes forward, pick a spot. If you're squatting right in front of a wall, you might have to pick a spot on the wall, but otherwise like a spot maybe 8 to 10 feet out in front of you on the ground. And that's just kind of where you're going to look. Right.
And yes, chin down, but not so far down that your head is now tucked in the opposite position. Like Adam said, you want to be
neutral.
Looking, 10, 12 inches in front of you. And then the other thing I wanted to say about the squat is, when you're squatting, your whole body should be active. So for instance, if you're in the goblet squat, you should have, your elbows should be racked into your body. You should be tight through your core. You should be squeezing that kettlebell or that dumbbell. Everything is active in the squat. This is not just about isolating the lower body. And the same goes for if you've got a barbell. You want to get the grip on that barbell and you want to push up against it when you're coming out of the squat. So not that you want to lift it off your shoulders, but you want to feel like your whole body is connected into that range of motion. You're actually actively engaging your whole body.
Totally, with your elbows aligned directly under your wrists and that kind of driving up, and it just solidifies your thoracic spine. And the same with the goblet squat, like what Vanessa was talking about with the elbows dug in at the sides. It does the same thing. When you create that tension and torque in your shoulders, it stabilizes your thoracic spine and makes the whole thing, safe and solid. Because like we've seen sort of with everything, what we're trying to do is translate power from the ground through our legs, and into this bar. And anywhere in there that gets soft or loses a little bit of position is sort of bleeding off power. It's like trying to push a rope.
Right. And, something that you should be thinking about is, where are you feeling this? Where are you feeling the tension in your body when you're going through the range of motion? And if you do your squats and the next day, just your quads are fired up and your quads are wrecked, but you didn't feel anything through your glutes or your hamstrings, then that's an imbalance. Then you're squatting too far forward on your toes. You should be feeling this in your glutes and your hamstrings. You should be activating from your glutes more so than your hamstrings. So that's something to think about when you are doing, when you're squatting, is the next day, where are you sore? If you sit on the toilet and it hurts, then
you did it right.
That's a good sign. Yes.
It's the ultimate squat test.
And this is a big deal because a lot of folks don't know how to fire their glutes. We see, this is something we're very, very detached from glute engagement as humans at this point in our life because of the way that we move in our lifetime and move regularly throughout the day. Most of us are pretty detached from knowing how to activate glutes. And you should even be thinking about this when you're walking. You should be thinking about, a little squeeze under the butt. Most people kind of just walk and they stomp around, but you should be engaged through your glutes when you're walking. They should be turned on.
Yeah. And when you're sitting and when you stand up and when you go to sit down and
Yes.
the glute and your whole hip structure, is designed to keep everything squared away and sort of initiate movement, and we just have it all turned off for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that we want to mention is, for a long time, the squat was taught with toes turned way out. So that's another thing. We don't want toes, you don't want to be in ballet position. What is it? In third position or whatever, where toes are straight out. You do want feet or toes facing forward. There can be a slight 10 or 15 degree angle if you need it. But for the most part, toes are pointed straight forward.
Yep. Truth.
And so what that means is, if you can't squat with your toes straight forward, then you're looking at a flexibility issue, or you're looking at that glute engagement issue where you don't know how to get back into your heels and engage from the glutes to stabilize in that position. So the first thing I would just, for those of you out there that are like, I don't know, you guys lost me. Just bottom line is, go to do a squat, do your heels lift up? Or is it hard for you to keep your heels on the ground? If that's the case, then you need to be squatting, holding on to something for a while until you can get those glutes turned on, until you can really feel comfortable in the bottom position. And it will improve over time. It's definitely one of those things that it's another proprioception thing where you've just got to get those neural pathways connected.
Yeah, but and just get your hips opened up, so you can make room and get back there. But it's usually a number of things, that are kind of holding you up from getting into that squat position. But the bottom line is the hip mobility stuff that we're doing, the internal, external rotation, hip capsules, all of that coupled with practice, and it all just gets better. Yeah. Right, but absolutely. That door, like Vanessa was saying, that door squat can't be undervalued. I mean, it's just a really good way to get squared away.
Absolutely. Okay, so I guess we're good on the squats.
Yeah, as good as I think as good as you can do on a audio only.
Exactly. I know it's really hard to talk through.
No, you don't see this. Let's see.
Imagine that.
Well, let's see. Yeah. Okay. Next up, supplementation. So we had some questions about magnesium, probiotics, and vitamin D, which are all good things. And short answer, if you don't want to continue listening, yes, probiotics, magnesium, and vitamin D. Hard to go wrong. But let's go a little bit more in depth on that stuff. So starting with magnesium, generally speaking, we think it's a good idea to supplement with magnesium. It's a very important mineral for us to have. It regulates so many things. It's the antagonist to calcium. So it all the things that calcium does, it balances out. So very important that we have both of those in the appropriate ratios. Generally speaking, it's a little easier for us to get calcium in our diet, but it's pretty hard to get magnesium these days. And one of the reasons for that is that normally our largest dietary intake of magnesium comes from kind of the really dark leafy greens, spinach and kale and stuff like that. But the soil quality and the age of the plants that are being harvested sort of affects the mineral content, right? So if you're eating baby kale that was grown in mineral deplete soil, it's probably not really going to get you much in the way of magnesium. So that's kind of the primary issue as to why we don't really have it. I think the other problem is that there's some absorption, some potential absorption issues with people where they just don't absorb this stuff very well. So if you're already, eating mineral depleted foods and you're not a super keen absorber, then you're probably going to be deficient on the magnesium. So with all of this stuff, the probiotics are kind of difficult to test, but with magnesium and vitamin D, it's a simple blood test that can kind of see where you're sitting, if you're deficient or sufficient, and that certainly something you could add to your repertoire and get it checked out. If you don't want to, there's really not a lot of downside, to supplementing. I mean, you being magnesium sufficient, it's hard to overdose on magnesium, I guess is what I'm saying. So feel free. It's cheap. It's easy to do. I'd say, just do it. Somewhere between 400 and 1,200 milligrams a day is kind of what most people end up throwing down, depending on how they're doing it. I personally like the chelated magnesium glycinate in a pill. It doesn't mess with my stomach, and I can do 1,200 milligrams without any gastrointestinal issues, where Natural Calm is a magnesium citrate that you mix, and 1,200 milligrams of that stuff puts me out of service. So,
yeah, we used to take Natural Calm before we went to bed, and it does actually help. I think it helps with getting to sleep. Some of you who suffer with sleep problems, it could be a potential that you could try that and see if that helps.
Yeah, totally. A nice warm, it's almost like tea, a little Natural Calm in there and stir it up. It's nice and warm and, tastes kind of funny. But again, titrate up Don't jump right into the 1,200 milligram into the pool.
Start small.
Yeah, start small. See how your guts work. So vitamin D next up, similar to magnesium, it's tough to get these days, right? For a lot of people because we're indoors so much, and if you're one of these people who's fortunate enough to work outdoors or live in a tropical, sunny environment and not have to worry about clothes or whatever, then it probably isn't for you.
If you live in a tropical nudist colony,
then you're probably just fine.
Then you're good. Yeah,
eating a lot of fermented fish, then you're good to go. But most everyone else, I mean, even like I consider myself kind of a perfect example, living in Southern California, where it hasn't rained in 100 years or whatever. I mean, the sun is out, and yet I'm vitamin D deficient, and it's primarily because we just spend that much time indoors and not a lot of time out, getting that conversion. So definitely worth testing yourself on this. There's no doubt about it. Get it tested, see if it's working. And the reason I'm a little more apt to recommend the testing for vitamin D is because some people don't absorb it well at all. Like the most common form that you can supplement from is D3, is calciferol. And some people just don't seem to absorb it. However, there's some liquid drops that some people absorb really well, So this is one where if you're concerned about it, then you may want to actually do a retest a couple times a year and see if the absorption or the supplementation you're doing is actually helping.
Right.
Yeah. I think somewhere between like 2,000 IUs and 10,000 IUs is sort of the norm. I've been taking 10,000 since February every day. And
what was the app that you were using that told?
Yes, D-Minder. It was somebody in the program used it and spread it around. The app is called D-Minder, and it uses your geolocation and some other data or whatever to sort out whether or not the sun is actually producing, strong enough rays to generate vitamin D. So it's super cool. And it'll set a little alarm, and it's like, hey, it's time. Or
go outside.
It's not time. Yeah, it's like, go outside. Oh, you missed your window, and like all that kind of stuff.
And it turns out the window's pretty small. We were using it for a little while, like Adam said, in Southern California, and it was like, okay, that didn't work.
That's interesting. So I just got 200 IUs. That's not enough.
Yep. Yeah. I need 10 times that amount, and I was outside for 4 hours.
Yeah. And, I actually was listening to, I think it was Mercola, interviewed some crazy old scientist who's like the vitamin D guy. He's like 75 years old. He's been studying vitamin D since he was 12 or something. And he was talking about, just the importance and how kind of wacky some of the recommendations are. And his take home, or his sort of takeaway, was that the RDA is probably 10 times lower than it should be.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that before. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think that's kind of common knowledge at this point, right? So it's like, it's definitely 10 times lower. But the reason it's 10 times lower because somebody balled up the math. Like literally, he went back into the studies that these guys were doing, and they screwed up the math. Like some pretty simple math.
They should have had you do it.
No, yeah, exactly. With my big number counting.
It's podcast number 17.
I would have definitely figured out that they were in like 6 orders of magnitude wrong on there, or whatever that is. I think it's 3 orders of magnitude. But yeah, anyway, can't believe everything you read, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it? Truth, lies, and statistics? Or wait.
No.
Lies. No. Lies. Damn lies and statistics.
Yeah.
There you go.
Those are the 3 kinds. The 3 kinds of lies.
Simpson moment.
Yeah. Old Jessica.
Okay. Probiotics.
Tell me about them.
Well, we talked about probiotics a few weeks ago, and I strongly feel that, especially if you're new to the paleo sphere, the ancestral health world, if you've just started cleaning up your diet in the last 6 months, even up to a year, that probiotics can make a really important and useful change in your gut flora. So personally, I think that probiotics are really important for people, in particular in the beginning of their journey. And furthermore, I think it's important to rotate the kind of probiotics that you're taking. So if you're taking a certain brand and it's got 30 billion strains, and the next one you take has 20 billion strains, you just want to be switching it up so that you can hopefully populate your gut with the most diverse spectrum of flora possible. And ultimately, we hope that you get to the point where you're doing things like fermented foods and kefir and things like that are naturally populating or keeping that balance at a really healthful place. But in the beginning, I think it's a great idea to do probiotics for maybe 6 months, even up to a year.
Yeah, load them up and just give it a shot. Me personally, they tear my stomach up. Like it's so hard for me to take the regular pilled probiotics. I can do the fermented foods and like straight up drink, raw sauerkraut juice and everything's fine. But something about the pill form of probiotics is just tough for me to do. So I'm kind of banking on the fermented food front. Although that being said, there's one that Chris Kresser recommends called Prescripticist, and like one of the things that he really likes about it is that it tends not to mess people's stomachs up. I haven't tried it yet, but he swears by it, and he's considerably smarter than me. So,
yeah, I was reading actually some reviews on it the other day. Well, it's just like any supplement. There's always the naysayers and then the people who swear by it, and it's tough to know. Honestly, it's tough to know if which road to take. But we took probiotics for a long time in the beginning, even if it messed up our stomachs.
Yeah. Well, you took more. I
did.
I don't know.
Yes.
I threw a lot of them away, but pretend took them while you were, recovering from your antibiotics shenanigans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My overdose of antibiotics.
Your overdose of antibiotics, exactly.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But for me personally, I noticed a huge difference. In particular, what Adam's talking about, I've done a lot of antibiotics at a certain point in my life after being extremely ill, and it really did help. It helped me come back, and I think that I don't know. I guess I've mentioned this already. I think it can really do a lot of wonderful things for people. Yeah,
definitely worth giving it a shot. Worst case scenario, it makes you sick to your stomach for a day, and then you figure out some other way to do it. Okay, so next up is pull-ups. Everybody seems to want more pull-ups and slick ways of increasing their pull-up numbers, which is that's the legit thing to want. and so we did actually cover this a few weeks ago on the podcast, but we can kind of hit the points again, and maybe we'll pick up something that we didn't last time around. One thing, just from a sheer physics perspective, being lighter helps. So if your primary goal is to increase your pull-up numbers, keep shedding body fat, that's going to help dramatically. And then if you are already pretty dang lean, then we might need to look at a few other things here. One being just more overhead pressing. Right? So we're looking to increase your overall upper body strength, and specifically your shoulders and where they attach to your body. You just want all that stuff to be strong and sinewy and muscly, and that's going to help dramatically.
Right. And for anything that you want to do, anytime you're trying to increase strength in any area, you always want to work the inverse of that motion. So pulling, pressing. Yeah. So, if you are strong in both sides of the motion, then each direction, if you will, is going to strengthen the other direction.
Totally. Yep. So pressing and pressing is easily scalable, right? So you may not be able to do even anything that looks like a pull-up, but you can grab some super light dumbbells and press. And that's an awesome way to get going there.
Right.
Yeah. And then there is another part of this too that's like just sort of like the squatting. There's going to be some people who just have a hard time doing pull-ups. They're just not going to be good at pull-ups and not going to have a bunch of them to throw around.
Right. Right. Your body type just may be antithetical to a lot of pulling up.
Yeah. It just may not work out. Your shoulders may not like to support the load. You may not get strong in the appropriate, or it just may not be easy for you to get good at them. or to get more of them. So don't let it dissuade you from trying, but just don't get super down on yourself if you're following all these protocols and doing the 100 pull-up a day challenge, trying to get better at it or something, and it's just not working out. It's some people just kind of have a hard time with it. So one of the other things, though, is that we really haven't been programming a ton of pull-ups in. So those last few months, we've been a little bit light on the pull-ups because we've been focusing on some other parts of the body and kind of really firing up the larger movers in the big muscle groups to kind of burn a little bit more body fat. Not that you can't add pull-ups in there, but we're just always walking that line of volume, right? So if you really want to increase your pull-ups, then throw in some throughout the day, in addition to what we're doing at with the regular workouts. You can go in and throw in every time you walk past your pull-up bar. I'm assuming you have one if you're this interested in pull-ups. Every time you walk by, jump up and hit 3 to 5 or a max set or whatever, and do that a couple times a day, in addition to the normal programming, and it adds up over time, and it won't take away from your recovery.
Right. And we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, and like we were talking about the squat earlier, remember that pull-ups are not an isolated movement. So when you're training your pull-ups, make sure that you're engaged through the core. You are tight throughout your entire body. The position of your body can actually help or hinder your ability to pull up. So, you want legs together, butt turned on. That sounds weird. but
it's right, though.
But it's right. You want to squeeze your butt. You want to engage your abs. And you want your entire body to be engaged when you're trying these movements so that you can get better power output.
Yeah, less bleed off. Keep your sternum pulled down, all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's actually a really important cueing point is if you're doing pull-ups and you're arching your back to get up to the bar. And that happens a lot of times when people fatigue. They start to arch to kind of get, it's like they want their
Are you
chest.
Arching?
Yes.
You sound like you're arching.
I'm arching. Damn it. Busted.
You can't even get away from the broken thoracic spine fault remotely.
No, I can't. I'm Italian. I talk with my hands and my back. But no, really, and then everyone out there has probably seen somebody do that where they kind of arch their back and they try to get their chest to the bar. And you want to keep everything in a nice straight line. Keep everything engaged tight, like Adam said, sternum pulled down, chest pulled down, abs engaged. And really, if you're not making it through the range of motion in that position, take a break and hit it later. You want to train it in the right pathway. You don't want to train a broken pattern.
Yeah. There's actually another exercise, and I cannot find a good video for it. So we're probably just going to have to make one. But those of you that have the WASP or the TRX or just gymnastics rings, just visualize what I'm talking about here. I can't believe that I didn't just ever think of doing this before, but it makes total sense. So set up your WASP system or whatever, your strap trainer rings, whatever it is, 2 pieces of rope with a handle in it. Set them up hanging from something and sit sort of cross-legged underneath them. And they should be at an appropriate height where you can get your hands into them, but that you're at full extension when you're seated, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So sitting cross-legged, TRX system above you, reach straight up into the rings, and then you're going to pull the rings down into your ears. So essentially you're just doing a pull-up, but you can use your feet sort of sitting in this cross-legged position to apply pressure and take the weight off. Just do everything I described and set it up. It'll totally make sense. So you just pull, like a normal pull-up, but your hands are going to be coming from almost touching over your head to down on the outside of your ears. And you can get the kind of volume that you need to get the strength to get more pull-ups from that position. And it's really hard to do it wrong. Like it's a really good way to even actually rehab your shoulders to some degree. But it's a pretty slick way to do it to get some more volume in there. So if you've already done, if you've kind of want to graduate from the standing ring rows or TRX rows into something that's a little bit more vertically oriented, like a normal pull-up, that could be a pretty good way to do it. I'll see if I can find a video to link, but so far it's been unsuccessful. They all just include a bunch of other really horrible faults. I'm not, you're like, oh, that's cool. Oh, but not that.
Never mind.
Oh, no, don't do that, so.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me. I was on Instagram the other day, and I saw a guy posted a squat video, and he's like, I'm really not a shit talker on people, but like he was like, I maxed on my squat today, and I swear to God, he squat like 2 inches and stood up.
Quarter squat, yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh.
That's amazing.
So don't do that.
You must be able to squat a lot. Yeah, well, I mean, at least it's safe. It's just like, somebody's like, I have a 2,000-pound back squat. You're like, really? How far?
Is that really a back squat, or is that a butt wink?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, anyhow.
Yeah. Standards.
Yep, you gotta have them.
Gotta have them.
And, actually, just one other thing on the pull-up, rehabbing your shoulder. Adam just mentioned that position is good for rehab. Making sure that you're doing all this shoulder mobility work that we're talking about is really important, because if you've got an impingement, that could be the thing that takes away that strength balance and that power output to be able to increase your numbers as well. So
totally.
It's the whole package. It's the whole picture, doing all the things.
Gotta keep doing it all.
The things, yes.
Yeah. But there will be, for you pull-up heads, there will be a little more pull-up volume coming for the summer.
Yes.
So,
and a t-shirt that says pull-up heads.
Pull-up heads.
Speaking of t-shirts, hopefully you guys got to see our new line of t-shirts out there that we just launched this week. So if you'd like to check them out, we got some cool designs, some elephants and some geometric prints,
patterns, and a bee.
Yes, and a bee.
The simple bee.
Yes,
which is cool. That was the straight simple bee.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's like, honestly, it's kind of funny that we didn't think of that right out the gate. But,
well, I was busy creating tie-dyed BBs. But no, there's some cool designs out there, and hopefully you guys can check them out. There is a link to our website, so you can check out our shop, and it's got all the new t-shirts, and you can be the wellness and be the wellness you wish to see in the world, and
be
all
the
that
wellness with an elephant.
Yes.
I'm excited about the elephant shirts. I think that one's
Me
cool.
too. Yeah, I'm excited too. It's like, I kind of thought, well, is it weird to have an elephant on our shirt since we're technically like a bee company? But I figured the elephants have enough crossover potential that we could have them.
No, there's that whole analogy, or is it an analogy? What do you call it when you're I'll just say what it is, and you can tell me what the grammar for it is.
It's a joke.
But when you see, yes, it's a joke. When you see a really big person on something small, it looks like an elephant riding a bumblebee.
Oh. No. Juxtaposition?
I suppose it is a juxtaposition. I mean, it is juxtaposed, but yeah, it looks like an elephant riding a bumblebee. That's like a saying where I come from, for big people on small things. So I guess bottom line is, yes, bees and elephants, they go together.
They go together.
Sometimes in the inverse of what you would suspect.
I feel like that would be a good shirt, though. Bees and elephants, they go together.
It's true. You should just create like a meme or something for Instagram, throw it out there, see how many likes it gets.
Yeah.
And then we'll go from there.
Speaking of Instagram, y'all should go like us on Instagram, and we'll like you back.
I think they all already do.
Oh, they do. All of them. They do.
But tell your friends.
Oh, yeah. And quick announcement for Costa Rica trip. We're looking for a single male who to round out another single male who needs a roommate. So anyone out there want to join us? We need a single female, too. One of our single females had to drop out. She had a scheduling conflict. So one single female, one single male. And then we've got some space for, singles or couples or whatever. So if you
Bottom
folks
line
are
is
interested,
that there's still room.
Yes, still room. And in particular for one man and one woman.
But not together.
But not together. Or together. I don't know. Whatever. There's still room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
I think we're done. Stop the madness.
Stop the madness.
Okay. Thank you guys for another awesome week, and we will be with you soon.
Yes, enjoy your final week, and summer is about to begin. Summer's coming. We will speak with you guys. Well, we'll be here next week.
We'll be here next week.
Bye.
Yeah. When you told me forever, did you have your fingers crossed? Try me on like a sweater. Must have been a fleeting thought. I'm not surprised. I'm glad it's over. I burned my pictures of you. I'm glad it's over. You never told me the truth. Yeah, you let me down. Yeah, you let me down. But you won't let me down. Yeah. Yeah.